Hey, this is Connor with the grain mill, and today I'm going to cut a bunch of walnut strips, drive 12 hours to get a new lathe, and get comforted by my dogs after making a mistake. Stick around. The idea of this project came from the theoretical drawings of wormholes, where a linear grid develops curvature representative of the curvature of space-time. In other words, the lines you see in this drawing and in this piece are straight, but the space around them is curved. At least that's the desired effect. To achieve this in wood, I'm using long strips of walnut and sandwiching maple veneers in between each one, and then I'll turn the entire piece on the lathe to achieve the curvature. So what you see me doing here is measuring these long strips of walnut to cut to size for the wormhole blank, which looks like this. Yep, I could have made it a lot simpler and just done a giant rectangle, but since walnut's so expensive, I decided to put the extra effort in and create a blank a little closer to the final shape to minimize waste and save a couple bucks. So now that I've got all my walnut strips organized, I'm going to be cutting them to their approximate final size. So here will be the longest pieces and they'll represent the full length of the wormhole. And I'll need 9 of these. And to cut them all the same length, I'm going to be using a stop block on the miter saw, which is just a little piece of wood that I can butt up the walnut against to get the same size pieces every time. Now I'll just need to sandwich a piece of veneer between each piece of walnuts, so I'll use an X-Acto knife to cut these strips. And here's how the glue up will look. This is technically 3 glue ups just next to each other, but I was able to keep them all in the same clamp setup to speed it up. Well, that was kind of messy, and my fingers are really cold, but it looks really good. Got pretty even squeeze out all the way through, back as well. So since it's so cold, I can't really leave this out here. I've had glue make really weak bonds when I've done that in the past, especially on segmented stuff. So we're gonna bring this guy inside and let it dry overnight. So now I need to make 3 more chunks that will eventually get cut to a smaller size. So the chunk I'll be making now is on the right, and then later on I'll cut them into the smaller strips you see on the left. Then I've got to cut more veneers to sandwich between these. These glue ups are kind of tricky, as most glue ups are. It's really tough to keep the each of the pieces kind of planar with the one next to it all the way across, and then sometimes the veneer wants to slip out and stick a little bit above the surface and then pulls out from the bottom. So I mean, you can even see here on this one, not quite perfect, but it's gonna have to do. I guess I'll just take a light light pass on the planer to kind of square these up, but not ideal. This glue up, which I did off camera, turned out pretty dang good. All those pieces seem pretty coplanar, and all the veneer sat really nice, so I think that panel will turn out really good. And now on to the next pieces. These little triangle shaped ones are more of the same, just different size walnut pieces, and then veneer sandwiched between them as well. Off camera, I cut out a bunch of these pieces. They're just 3 inch by 2 inch by 1 inch, and then obviously put the veneers in between. But there's 12 of them, and they'll go together like this. So I'll have my larger middle pieces here that kind of run the length of the wormhole, and then these will go on all the sides like this. And that kind of gets you that hourglass shape. And then it'll just be stacking layers on top of that to get it to be three-dimensional. Pretty cool. Now I'll run a hand plane across these glue ups if I can, to clean up the surfaces a bit so they lay flat on the miter saw for future cutting. With them flattened, I can then cut them to final size. In hindsight, I should have sent these through the thickness planer first, but I borrowed the thickness planer from a friend and didn't have it at this point, and in the spirit of keeping the project moving, I just got a little bit ahead of myself, and you'll see this comes back to bite me a little bit later. So that was a lot of cutting, but here's the current inventory of all the pieces I have, and I'll show you real quickly how they're going to go together, just roughly. So these 3 guys will be the middle part. So those all get glued together like that with a layer of veneer between. Then we'll use the next thickness piece down like that, and it'll be flanked by 2 of these little pieces like this. Then we'll go the next thickness, which is one of these, which will go like that, and it will get a single piece on each end, and then finally the top across there. So kind of what that'll look like on both sides. Oops. Be that, this, and that. And this is what it sort of looks like in an exploded view on the 3D model. So you can see all the individual pieces that I cut out and how they'll come together to form the blank. So you can kind of see how the wormhole shape is taking shape. Get the curve like that, but it goes all the way around. Pretty cool. And then that's kind of how the grid will look, and that will obviously carry all the way through. So back to the thickness planer. Like I said, I should have sent these through before cutting them down to smaller size, but I didn't. I mostly had good luck with the planer, no snipe or tear out or any major problems, until I decided to send one of these smaller pieces through. Oh, I learned a bit of a lesson here. If you don't angle short pieces enough going through a planer, they kind of just catch and fall apart. So this is kind of a huge setback, which is admittedly frustrating, but we'll go ahead and make a new one of this piece and get on with this project. Hi, buddy. Thank you. Pike is very concerned. He can have some walnut. Oh, Delta's concerned too, apparently. Great. All right, here's kind of a progress update. So I was feeling a little crappy yesterday, so I didn't turn the camera on. But what I did is just glued my 3 hourglass-shaped pieces together with veneer in between. Turned out really cool. It's really hard to get these veneers to line up to perfectly create a grid, but did what I could. And then I also glued up these chunks. So these are the 3 sort of triangle-shaped pieces. Obviously veneers between, same deal, lining up the grid. Did an okay job. It turns out this longer top piece was just like a hair wider when I milled it, so you can see kind of at the end there's not a perfect alignment. Likewise there, but towards the middle it looks really good, and that's where there's going to be the most curvature effect. So I think the middle is going to be more important. So I've got 3 of those. Obviously with my exploded piece yesterday, I had to kind of restart there, so I've got this gluing up at the moment. But for now, we're going to glue 1/2 of this so it's the full thickness and the full 3D effect. So let's do it. But first, I got to cut some veneers. Okay, veneers are cut. So let's do this. That's B, so that'll be the back side. A. Some money, jeez. Oh god, it looks so good, baby. Okay. So once I got this blank made, I went to chuck it up on my little Harbor Freight lathe, and it did not fit. So what you see me doing here is driving out to Bellingham to the Grizzly headquarters to grab myself a new lathe. All right, the lathe is acquired. It's hanging out in the back there. I'm actually surprised the shipping container fit in my car, but it did, so that was easy. Now for my 360-mile trip back to Spokane through the snowy Snoqualmie Pass. It's gonna be a great time. Well, good news. Oh gosh. Good news. I got my new lathe, and it's excellent. Bad news is I threw the Wormhole project on here and forgot to film the first bit of turning. So here's how it's looking, and I'll film the rest of it. Yeah, anyway, so here is what the blank looked like. Just look at this side only. It's a mess of dangling veneers, and now there's some scrap walnut sticking out. But that's what the blank looked like from the back here, kind of just still ugly. Here's what I've done so far. So you can see how the grid kind of comes together, follows the curve. It's gonna be pretty dang cool. So please enjoy the rest of this thing being turned. Since the blank was already a close representation of the final shape I wanted, getting it started on the lathe was actually pretty straightforward. I just needed to round over any of the square edges other than the very outside edge, and then kind of just hone in on the exact curve that I wanted. I did this mostly using a bowl gouge, but occasionally got the scraper involved just to clean up any rough cuts or jitter or whatever. Cutting the end grain is always a little tougher than face grain. You can see here I got a little bit of tear out, but it's totally okay at this point because this is just an initial shaping pass, and ultimately a lot of this is just going to be hollowed out anyway. So I'll come back later to achieve a smoother cut here. Well, here it is after some preliminary turning. Got the shape pretty dialed into what I want it to be. You can see the curvature there. I think it's super cool. But yeah, it's kind of a quicker turning than I thought it would be. The ends here ended up somewhat thin, as you can see, and I haven't even flattened the back side of this, so that is a slight area of concern. This one I did flatten the back side, just kind of roughly, see without the glue. And this one is about the thickness I'd want it to be. It's a little uneven at the moment, but yeah, pretty happy with how this is coming along. But this is the easy part. We've still got to hollow it and do all the internal curvature. So stay tuned. So far, the way I have this mounted on the lathe has been with a faceplate that is screwed into the wormhole on the headstock side, and then a live center on the tailstock side. A live center just being a little pointy end that can kind of nestle itself into the piece and then attach to a bearing so it freely spins. However, once I started hollowing this thing, devising ways to mount it while keeping it turning true became more and more difficult, and I had to flip it back and forth a few times too. So I want to take a quick second to show how I've mounted this so far. So the turning you've seen has been flipped over. So basically this end was at the headstock and vice versa. And that was just with a faceplate that I centered on the back and screwed in. Since this is all getting hollowed out, these screw holes won't show, so no problem there. To flip it around, I didn't film this, I wish I had, but I was just kind of racking my brain how to do it, and it would have been sloppy editing and stuff. So I had it mounted the other way, and I centered this piece of plywood best as I could on the back of it, and then just did the blue tape super glue trick to kind of secure it on there, and then centered the second faceplate in there. So now it's not like perfectly true to what it was before, so it'll take a little bit of turning to get it back to a totally even situation, but it's good enough for my purposes here. So next step is going to be turning this whole situation down and getting it about as close to a finished surface as I can, and then I'm going to have to install some little clips all the way around, which I'll show a little later, to secure this down a little better, and then I will remove the faceplate here, take the tailstock off, and hollow through that way. So that's the plan going forward. Let's do it to it. So here I'm beginning to take the final pass on this side of the wormhole. So I'm taking a really shallow cut here, not with the intention to remove material, but to just leave as smooth of a surface as I can to help reduce sanding later. Okay, here are those clips I mentioned. So there's just a little chunk of wood with a rabbet cut into the end, a rabbet just being a little square cutout. And these will overlap the wormhole. So I'll screw them into the plywood here, and they essentially just act as clamps to hold the wormhole in place. So now that it's spinning, you can see there's a tiny bit of wobble with this new mounting setup, but I honestly don't know that there was really any way I could avoid this without some crazy special equipment that I do not have and cannot afford. Luckily, it ended up working out fine, and I didn't really run into any major issues with vibration. But with all that said, it was still super scary to do because basically any mistake or catch of the tool would rip this thing apart. So now it's time to hollow the center. I started with a 5/8 inch bit that is tapered and fits into the tailstock of the lathe. This isn't the full diameter of the center, but generally speaking, removing small amounts of material many times is safer than removing lots of material one time, and not really taking any chances with this. So with the 5/8 bit completely bored through, I'll now throw a drill chuck on the tailstock and send an 1¼ inch Forstner bit through. This will be the final diameter of the center. Toward the end of this project, I got pretty lazy with filming because I just wanted to keep things moving and didn't really feel like setting up the camera. So once I got this thing totally hollowed through, I went back with the gouge and scraper and just did the final shaping of the interior curvature. It's nothing you haven't seen already in this video, so just picture it. Then I'll use this drywall knife here to help separate the blue tape from the plywood and the super glue. And I probably overdid it with the super glue here, but again, not really looking to take any risks. So you probably noticed by now, but while turning this, I had some pretty decent edge damage around the whole thing on both sides, which is kind of a bummer. We'll know next time to put some wood on there to kind of keep that safe. Been really thinking about how I want to deal with that, and I think ultimately what I'm going to do is just cut and chisel out any pieces that are broken and just replace them. I have so much walnut left over, and I really only need to cut, 1/4 inch pieces, and that should be enough to patch everything up. So gonna be a little bit of extra work, but I think ultimately I want this to be square on the ends rather than circular, which also crossed my mind. So yeah, I think that's gonna be the plan going forward, which at least gives me a break from sanding. Okay, so I just had a go at removing one of the pieces. It actually went pretty well. I just used a combination of actually a hacksaw just because the teeth are so fine, and then just a really sharp chisel to get that piece off, and then cut some new little squares that'll just sit right in there, and yeah, I think that'll do it. Alright, here it is, taken apart. It actually looks kind of cool. I'm not going to keep it like this for this one, but might be something for a future idea. So yeah, time to put it back together. The hand sanding is underway. It's taking forever. It's going to be hours and hours of this. But I have a light set up here that's helping me spot any scratch marks from the lathe that I need to get out. You can see a little bit of that here, so all that needs to be hand sanded out. Something down here, yeah, you can see that. So we got to get all that out of here before anything can go forward. So here we go. Okay, so what I've done here is off camera, I turned these little stumps. They're just rounded over pieces of 2x2 from the home center. I'm putting a little bit of a towel on the ends of each one to keep them soft from marring up the wood. And then what's going to happen here is we'll put one end of the wormhole here, kind of wedge that in, and then, sorry, my arm's in the way. And then on the other end, we've got this guy to go in, and just like that. Now it's wedged in place. I'll crank it down just a hair, but it doesn't really need it. And then I can actually just fire up the lathe, and it's not going to be balanced by any means, but that's enough spin that I'll be able to apply finish, and with some proper balancing, I'll be able to buff it out a little bit and get the shine level that I want. So guess it's time for that. For finish, I use tried and true original. The more woodworking I do, the more I want to get away from toxic products in my shop. Tried and true is safe from start to finish, so I don't really even need to wear gloves when I'm putting it on. And then if I feel like I want to, I can eat off of this wormhole because it cures food safe. Anyway, I applied 5 coats of finish, buffing with 4/0 steel wool between each layer. There's a nice matte sheen on the piece that in my opinion looks way better and more natural than any super high gloss finish. In the spirit of being lazy and not filming stuff, I totally skipped over the making of the base for this wormhole. What I ended up using was a piece of manzanita burl that I lightly dyed with some blues, blacks, and purples to make it look kind of like a nebula, and then cast it in black epoxy to just solidify the whole thing. You'll see it in the beauty shots in just a second here.